on a Sunday afternoon. Good afternoon. Welcome. We are thrilled to be together today. I know how important each of you are to Andrew and Lily and how special it is for them to have you present this afternoon for this occasion. My name is Steve Ivester, and I serve as a board member with the Institute for Faith and Flourishing, which oversees Andrew's writing and the Neighbor Love movement in Ethiopia. I also serve here at the college as the Dean for Student Engagement, and have had the privilege of getting to know Andrew through a program we started back in 2012 with some colleagues called the Authority, Action, Ethics in Ethiopia, an immersion cultural experience. And I love Andrew. I love what he stands for, I love what he does, I love who he is, and I love this book. And I think we are all excited to be able to be here together for that reason, to be celebrating the launch of Faith and Flourishing, 7 practices of a new we. And I know Andrew's delighted and Lily are delighted to have you all here today. I want to say thank you to Lily DeCort for hosting this. Thank you, Lily. Amazing spread of food that we have and the hospitality of the room. So we're blessed, Lily, by your care for us in inviting us. And thank you to Susan Shadid here in the back. Been a delightful collaborator in planning this and putting it together. And then there are quite a few friends that were helping set up, so thank you for those who came early to set up today. So shortly, we're going to begin this book launch by inviting Kate Schmidgall. Is that the correct way of pronouncing it?
Close enough.
Okay. She'll correct it in a few minutes, I'm sure. She's Andrew's publisher and the founder of BitterSweet Books. And she's going to tell us a little bit about this book. And then after that, Andrew and Lily have some words for us. And then we're going to have a brief interview with a colleague of mine, Dan Haase, who is the chair of the Christian Formation and Ministry Department here at the college. Andrew and Dan will have an interview for 10, 15 minutes or so. And we'll have an opportunity to do a Q&A after that interview. And then following the interview, you'll have a chance to purchase the book. The books are over here. And as we all know, Christmas is right around the corner. It might be a great opportunity to buy the book for a family member. Or perhaps the Lord will surprise you with a friend or person that this book might really minister to. So we would encourage you to buy a couple of the books this afternoon. And we'll conclude by taking a group photo at some point. So Andrew would love to gather all of us into one large photo. We'll figure that out logistically at some point. I'm sure we can find a way to make that work. So there's a large framed cover of the book at the entrance. If you would make sure you sign that before you leave, give Andrew a note of encouragement, but we'd love to invite everyone to be signing that this evening. So that's it. Let me now introduce Kate to join us. So Kate, come on up. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Kate Schmidgall. Very close, as I said. And as the publisher, I would love to say if you'd like to buy 5 books, you're more than welcome. Christmas, of course. This is an absolutely momentous occasion. I am extremely proud that Andrew is our first author, and this book is our first book. It was November 2nd of 2021 when I, along with likely many of you, received an email from Andrew and from Lily, who were announcing that they were relocating to the United States after a long time in Ethiopia. With the support of their board, they're making this transition in part so that Andrew could focus on his writing. And in that email, there was a link. Am I the only one that saw it? Did anyone else click the Google Doc? It was an outline of 36 books that Andrew has inside of him, that he has been long sort of nurturing quietly behind the scenes. And this first book was based on Jesus' prayer, the one that begins, Our Father, and then proceeds to outline 7 practices for flourishing and for living faithfully. When I read the synopsis of that first book, it's something like a wave of certainty and clarity came over me. And I've only experienced that twice before, just for the record. The first is when I decided to marry my husband, and the second was when I decided to start BitterSweet. This was the 3rd time that certainty and clarity came, and I knew that BitterSweet had to publish this book. I think in this long, ugly season of upheaval and vitriol, in a war-filled year after 2 years of pandemic blur, seems to me like the weary faithful need a summons. Seems to me, Andrew, like the soulful sojourners, the ones that we nurture in Washington, D.C. as, part of a congregation, need a warming fire somewhere out there in the wilderness as they are beginning to navigate a new sort of wilderness of belief, a wilderness of belonging. And this book, Andrew, is, I think, that. It's a warming fire where wanderers can gather around and be encouraged and find one another in their seeking, on their journey. And I know that that's true because when I invited Andrew to come to DC back in like February or March of this year to meet the BitterSweet community and the community to meet him, no less than a dozen creatives raised their hand to say, I have to be part of this project. Whatever you need, I want to participate. Before we had a pro forma, before we had a business model for how BitterSweet publishes books, we had a team of more than a dozen professionals willing to say, my photography, my filmmaking, my writing, my editing, my design, my illustrating, my audio production skills, I offer. That's how I know that this is deeply resonant and that it's not me, the publisher. It's actually a community of people, all of us seeking to live faithfully and finding a lot of encouragement and direction in Andrew's work. So it is my joy to be here today to welcome you all to this launch. Flourishing on the Edge of Faith is already nurturing, I would say, our weary souls in Washington, D.C. It has, even for those of us who have read it, edited it, produced it, many times over, we're reading it again, listening to it again, which, yes, there will be an audiobook here very shortly. I know you all were asking that question in your minds. We're reading it, we're listening to it again and again, because this is a book that helps us to see a path forward, a path of faithfulness. It also orients us to the work that's ours to do in the world, which is a healing work, I think, for our generation particularly, maybe. But this is a book that orients us to our neighbor, that orients us to a radical self-giving, that calls us out of our own self-concern, and even out of nihilism if we're tempted in that direction. This is a book that gives us practices and a path. It's my joy to also say that many of you in the room I know have already lent your support, your encouragement, your endorsements, your resource to the work of writing this book, and so we wanted to say thank you for that. And it seems appropriate to read a couple of those endorsements now, just a few of those who I think are in the room, to just further celebrate the community work that this is. Before I do that, I also want to say that the community that I'm a part of really trusts this work in part because we trust Andrew, and because we see him as a man of courage, of boldness, of integrity. We see in Andrew and in his work the conviction of an ever-expanding love of God, ever-transforming love of God that can meet anyone, anywhere, at any time, and call them to a deep intimacy and knowing and being known. His is a passion that burns white hot, and we recognize that, and we respect it. And so it's my pride, my honor to be your publisher, and to stand with you in this work. And with that, I will read from a couple of others who I know have also lent their lives in some way to encourage Andrew in this writing endeavor. Grant Hensel is the founder of the Roundup app and nonprofit Megaphone. Grant is also an IFF, Institute for Faith and Flourishing board member. And he wrote, I think of Dr. Andrew DeCort as the C.S. Lewis or Dietrich Bonhoeffer of our time. His writing provides rare and breathtaking insight into the words of Jesus and shows how they have the power to help us reimagine every moment of our lives. Dr. Sarah Borden-Sharkey is professor of philosophy here at Wheaton College. And Sarah wrote, Andrew DeCort has given us a rare treasure in Flourishing on the Edge of Faith, transforming what so often becomes rote into a tool for renewal. To unpack the heart of Jesus' teaching in those 7 lines is a gift of tremendous worth. Andrew DeCort shows that the power of Jesus' prayer rests on Jesus' first word, our. This is Dr. Michael McCoy, Chair of Department of Politics and International Relations here at Wheaton. I'll read it again. Andrew DeCort shows that the power of Jesus' prayer rests on Jesus' first word, our. God is our Father. We are we. From this, DeCort maps out Jesus' social vision against chauvinism, exclusion, and oppression. This is the orientation that we're seeking, one that can turn us toward one another and pay attention to our we-ness, if you will. An orientation that sees every person as our neighbor, and the radical self-giving and the love of God is ours to share, infinitely, indefinitely. With that, it is my esteemed pleasure to invite Mrs. DeCort, Mrs. Lily DeCort, the brilliant, beloved, prodigious painter, to further introduce Andrew, our author. Andrew, thank you for letting BitterSweet be your publisher.
Thank you, Kate, for those kind words and incredible remarks. We thank you all for coming and for being here. We're delighted that you came. I am really proud of Andrew. Over the past year, I've seen him pour his soul, his heart, his commitment, all his might into this book. And he has put so much courage into the book. And I've been really inspired by his commitment to keep going. I know writing this book has also taken a lot out of Andrew. He had to dig really deep and do a lot of inner work, like facing his own struggles as a writer. But it's truly been amazing and inspiring to see him keep going every day, even when it was really hard. And as most of you know, Andrew's an incredible writer. His writing comes out of his life of deep thought and careful listening. I was the first person to read Flourishing on the Age of Faith, and for me personally, it has helped me rediscover the Lord's Prayer in a much more profound and meaningful way, and I hope it inspires you like it has inspired me. Andrew, thank you for staying true and strong and exploring your vision, your voice, your heart and mind, and for sharing it with the world. Calling this book groundbreaking is an understatement. I see it as the best book ever written. I know I'm biased. You are loved, celebrated, cherished, and I encourage you to keep writing. Lastly, I want to thank the board of the Institute for Faith and Flourishing, Kate Schmidgall, and the entire BitterSweet team. Your collaboration and care for Andrew has been excellent and life-giving for both of us. We celebrate you and your achievement today as well. And big thanks for Susan Shadid for helping us orchestrate this party. Thank you. And I am now delighted to call our author to come and share briefly from his book.
Friends, this is a special day. I'm so delighted to see each one of you. Looking around this room, and there's just explosions of joy happening inside of me. I've known some of you most of my life. I've met some of you recently, and there's so much joy and gratitude that is just welling up inside of me. I just keep looking like, oh, wow, blown away. After years of gestation and a full year of active labor, this book is being born in public today for the very first time. Your presence here with us is a sacred gift. I've been given 10 minutes to speak right now, but I could speak for 10 hours. simply to express my gratitude for you and the extraordinary way that you have encouraged, inspired, empowered me to reach this day. You've all made this book possible in your own ways, and I always feel like it's a lie when there's just one name on the spine or a cover of a book. As Kate said so beautifully, this has been a community effort from start to finish. Please allow me to mention just a few of my many thanks and let them represent many others who are held close in my heart today, to try to respect my 10 minutes. Lily, thank you for being the unwavering champion behind this book. You were the first person to hear my vision, and you encouraged me to pursue it. When I delayed, you asked me that gentle and catalyzing question, when are you going to start writing that book you told me about? When we returned to Illinois from death threats amidst Ethiopia's civil war, you told me that you ached for me to write, and you encouraged me every single day of the writing process. With your healing presence, loving words, nourishing meals, affectionate kisses, glasses of water. Lily's always telling me to hydrate. I stop eating when I'm writing, so she brings me food. Thoughtful feedback, and many, many other ways. You have tirelessly shared my lows and my highs. Writing while you painted was one of the greatest joys of my life. I love the sound of your paintbrush dancing on your canvas. It would be like, and then, it was so amazing. Your luminous paintings have given my soul new eyes, new light, hope, trust, intimacy with God that has energized my writing like never before. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for hosting this amazing, beautiful, delicious, thoughtful party. And thank you for celebrating my life with so much commitment and sacrificial love. I wish I could tell you how we met in our journey, but I'm trying to respect time here. You're my gift from God, my best friend, brilliant painter and model of the fierce flourishing my book tries to describe. Special thanks to Dr. Steve Ivester, Dean of Student Engagement here at the college, one of my best friends, a colleague that I respect to the moon and back. Steve is hosting us today, and I want to say thank you to you, Steve. I also want to say thank you to Susan Shadid for laboring with us in designing and throwing this party. We're so moved by your gratitude, Susan. Thank you so much. I want to thank the board for the board of the Institute for Faith and Flourishing, Grant Hensel, who's here, Dr. Steve Ivester, Lily DeCort, James Hoy, and Liz Brown Evans, along with our founding brothers, Joe DeCort and Dan Boyce. Your enduring friendship, wise counsel, critical accountability, and generous giving have made this book possible and significantly better than it would have been if I was writing it by myself. I remember Grant saying, "You're trying to do too much. Focus on the book." Thank you for being my most trusted leadership. Deep thanks to our Institute for Faith and Flourishing donors. You love us, you pray for us, and you made this book possible with your generosity. If you're a donor to IFF and you RSVP'd for this event, there's a book with the black tablecloth that has copies for you. Some of you protested and said you didn't want a free book and that you wanted to buy your own. That's so kind and generous of you. You're welcome to buy as many as you want, but there are books there for you as a tiny token of our gratitude to thank you for sustaining our work. We are so moved by your generosity and your empowerment. I keep seeing people here that I want to specifically thank. Deep thanks to my beloved brother and the co-director of the Neighbor Love Movement in Ethiopia, Dr. Tekalen Nega. Tekalen is in Addis Ababa today. He couldn't be with us, but I want to acknowledge his presence here in my heart. Thank you, Tekalen, for embodying that neighbor love is possible, even in the worst war zone in the world. So moved by Tekalen's leadership. He's a peacemaker. Thank you to the many individuals who generously reviewed and endorsed this book. I dared to test this book's authenticity by sending it to many people I massively admire, but who may not always see things the same way that I do. A Jewish professor that I respect deeply, Michael Fishbane, a groundbreaking Muslim community organizer, Ibu Patel, an atheist philosopher who specializes in dehumanization, David Livingstone Smith, one of our country's foremost public commentators, Peter Weiner, the journalist I respect most in East Africa, Tom Gardner of The Economist, and many more. Their responses blew me away and touched my heart with their kindness. And I wish to thank each one of you for endorsing this book, and special thanks to those of you who are here today. Your words touched my heart deeply and have empowered this book. And on behalf of all the endorsers that are present here today, I would like to say a special thanks to Eric Elstein. He's the son of my PhD advisor, Dr. Jean Elstein, who made a tremendous impression on my life, and seeing Eric and Irene here today is the greatest privilege and honor, and we celebrate and honor your mom today. Thank you so much. Jesus said that the last will be first. Kate Schmidgall is my champion of a publisher at BitterSweet Books and my dear friend for over 20 years. When I started writing this book, I didn't have a publisher, but I did have a whiteboard next to my writing desk, and I wrote on it, Kate Schmidgall, BitterSweet, with a question mark. And it just kind of was present with me as I was writing. I went out to DC on February 11th. Kate had asked if we could have a conversation and generously flew me out. And I could describe this day in detail, but I remember that I sat down and Kate had some of my most favorite books on the table. She had a description of the values that would guide a publishing process. She had a plan for print, for digital, for audio. And when Lily and I transitioned from Ethiopia, Lily knows that I was craving, like soul craving, collaboration and beauty, and someone who would pull work forward that I had no idea how to do. And Kate showed up and has done that long before February 11th, but starting on February 11th in an extremely special way, and you have not stopped, Kate. You've blown me away with your prophetic vision, elegant professionalism, radical trust, tireless commitment to learning, super abundant generosity, attention to the smallest details, your seamless integration of gentle care for me as your author, and strong leadership to achieve the highest level of excellence. I am in awe of the way that you reject cynicism, defy apathy, and celebrate good. Every single day, and in the thousands of steps that went into making this book possible. And it's kind of wild how much goes into a little baby like this. Publishing with you, Kate, has been an answer to some of my most earnest prayers that I thought couldn't be answered. You are a sacred gift and have Lily's in my highest admiration and deepest gratitude. You're a blizzard of fresh power and the source of great joy. It's the highest honor to publish with you. Lastly, Kate leads a team of extraordinary, creative professionals at BitterSweet, and I am overjoyed to thank them for collaborating and birthing this book. Designers, artists, audio engineers, marketers. I'd like to thank my editor, Peter Hartwig, who made over 700 edits on my book. It was painful and exciting and made this book a lot better. Robert Winship, Obi Okolo, Dave Baker, Sarah O'Malley, Holly Harris, the artist of this beautiful artwork, Steve Jeter, Greg Sitzman, who did the typesetting, and Lori Parkinson. Each of you played vital roles in making this book possible. Thank you for your trust, love, and collaboration. Friends, many more of you are named at the end of this book in the gratitude section. Whether you are named or not, please know that I cherish your friendship. The beloved author Henry Nouwen wrote, quote, "Writing is a process in which we discover what lives in us. To write is to embark on a journey of which we don't know the final destination. I trust it will emerge as I write. I want to be free enough to live the questions of the spiritual life without fearing the consequences." That's the spirit in which I tried to write this book, Flourishing on the Edge of Faith. And it's my deepest joy and highest honor to share this book with you today in public for the first time. I've selected two of my favorite sections to read quickly, and I thank you for your attention. The first is just the dedication. For Jane, my mom, who birthed me in divine belovedness and taught me to pray with Jesus. For Graham Smith, who first believed in my writing and invested many years ago. For Dave Schmidgall, Kate's husband. He once told me, "You have books inside of you," and that was the push that I needed. For Joelle, Mark, Jenna, and Tyler, our cherished catastrophe. And for Lily, my lover, teacher, painter, and Patronus, for those of you who are Harry Potter fans. Seeing your face is like seeing the face of God. And I'm going to just read a small section from the first chapter of this book. This subsection is called, "You Are My Beloved Child." Jesus' invitation to call God our Father is rooted in perhaps the most intimate, important moment of his own life, a moment that he invites us to share with him in prayer. Before Jesus preaches a sermon or performs any public action, he journeys out into the wilderness. There he meets his radical cousin John by the River Jordan, where John is baptizing people from all over ancient Palestine. This immersive water ritual was meant to symbolize new birth, a washing away of old ways of living, and the start of a new way of being human with God. John called this metanoia in Greek, or a revolutionized mind. Jesus is plunged into the river by John and rises up with water washing over him. In this moment of sacred passage, Jesus sees heaven open and hears the voice of God say, "You are my beloved Son. I delight in you." I suspect that many of us have had this heaven-opening experience at some point in our lives. We call it epiphany, insight, or enlightenment. Its sacred message has been paraphrased in all sorts of ways. Hannah Arendt said, "I want you to be." Fred Rogers said, "I like you the way you are." The traditional Hindu greeting says, "I see God in you." These heaven-opening words speak to the core of Jesus' identity. They engulf him in his divine belovedness. They express God's unconditional pleasure in his being and a secure attachment that bathes and enlivens Jesus' humanity like the river's water rushing over his body. Our Father's primal declaration reveals that God understands our deeply human fear that we're ultimately alone and unwanted. From God's words, it also appears that Jesus knew this haunting inner pain. By this point in his life, Jesus had survived an atrocious political massacre, fled to a neighboring country as a child refugee, and grown up in a rural village synonymous with mockery. Jesus was woundedly familiar with loss, violence, and trauma. Our primal fear of being unloved and abandoned sets in motion a desperate struggle to perform, prove, and project that we are worthy of love. It also often leads us into a numbed or self-mutilating existence with a cutting inner voice of insult, rejection, and aggression. Here we find the hidden roots of some of our most desperate addictions. I have battled with both tendencies of ambitious performance and self-loathing throughout my life. During my PhD studies at the University of Chicago, I often heard an inner voice whisper, "You're a piece of shit." The timing then of God's heaven-opening message to Jesus is significant. Before Jesus has said or done anything that could seemingly earn love, God speaks this absolute affirmation into the core of his being. "You are my child. I love you. Your existence brings me happiness." It's unconditional. And God doesn't just say this once at the beginning of Jesus' movement. God says it repeatedly. In fact, this is the singular message that God revoices to Jesus throughout his life recorded in the Gospels. It's as if these words encompass everything our Father wants to say to us. The second time comes at a crucial turning point when Jesus faces growing unpopularity and rejection. Like the first, Jesus steps away into solitude, this time up in the mountains. There he prays and hears our Father repeat, "You are my beloved Son. I delight in you." Then, moments before Jesus' brutal execution and ultimate act of self-giving love, God echoes this soul-healing message yet again. I find it striking that even self-confessed atheists have had this experience of God. For example, Dina Bazer was a 63-year-old grandmother and ovarian cancer survivor. She was paralyzed with fear that her cancer would return and consume her life. But after an innovative treatment organized by New York University, Dina confessed, quote, "I'm an atheist. I don't believe there is a God. But then I began to feel this love, just overwhelming, all-encompassing love. And the way I describe it is being bathed in God's love, because I find no other way to describe it. I felt like I belonged, that I was part of everything, and had the right to be here. How else do I describe it? Maybe what your mother's love felt like when you were a baby." This feeling of love was suffusing the entire experience, unquote. This atheist's experience of divine belovedness is uncannily like Jesus' baptism. She recalls being bathed and suffused with nurturing parental love. And this love washed away her fear of dying and embraced her with complete belonging. My friend Simon Howard researches the testimonies of people who have had near-death experiences, and he's found a strikingly similar pattern. He told me, quote, "I don't think I've listened to a single recounting of a near-death experience that hasn't included a profound sense of being overwhelmingly loved by a being that is identifiably God, and that hasn't resulted in a new resolve for the experiencer to love others in their continued earthly existence." This is who Jesus experienced God to be. God is the one who knows us, who loves us, and who delights in us. God declares this before we have said or done anything. that could deserve love. God declares this at the beginning. And God continues declaring this to us even in the midst of fear, loss, violence, and death. It's unconditional. With his prayer's primal movement, then, Jesus invites us to talk to this God as our Father. He welcomes us to hear that divine whisper in the depths of our being. This voice opens heaven and interrupts other gnawing voices of shame, performance, rejection, and aggression. You are my beloved child. I delight in you. Nothing can make you less than that for me. Henry Nouwen wrote that this divine belovedness, quote, reveals the most intimate truth about all human beings, whether they belong to any particular tradition or not. This is where our practice of flourishing truly begins. Thank you for your attention. I want to thank you again for your presence today. Thank you so much for empowering me to embrace my vocation as a writer. And now it's my special honor to invite my dear friend and respected colleague, Dan Haase, to lead us in just a few minutes of dialogue. And I want to encourage you, please eat and drink as much as you can. Lily has made an abundant feast for us. I was privileged to collaborate with Steve Ivester and Dan Haase in this program, Authority, Action, Ethics, Ethiopia, here at Wheaton College for 3 years. Dan's now chair of the Christian Formation and Ministry program here at the college. Dan's also a dear friend, someone that I call the pedagogical Zen master, and one of my favorite living poets. Thank you, Dan.
All right, I'm going to set a timer because otherwise it'll be a long, long time. This is an absolute delight for me. As Andrew said, we go back. The first time I ran into Andrew was in a coffee shop in Addis, and if my memory serves me right, I think he was reading Plato in the Greek. And I remember thinking, who is this man? And a deep friendship started as we engaged in this program together and walked alongside students. Andrew has been a teacher to me. I think, why do I tell that story as I begin an interview with him? One of the things that has been, in reading this book and sitting with it, I realized as soon as I finished it, I read it too fast. Which the delight of that is like, well, now I can read it again, more slowly. And partly because what he's inviting us to do in this book is to slow down, to not only think and contemplate, which he does so well, but to invite us into the actual practice of a lived faith, and embodying these prayers that are offered to us instructively through Christ. I've often joked that I've known Andrew to be one whose head fell down into his heart and then out of his hands. And he has embodied a mind of deep intellect, which you will encounter through this kind of engagement of text. But this is deeply born in the experiences of a life of faithfulness. And so I wanted to take some time and just ask a few, and this is one of those things that's like, I've got 5 pages of just notes, so thus the timer. But, at the beginning of this book, one of the things that you write about, Andrew, is that this is an invitation for those who are on the edge of faith seeking a life of flourishing. And you use that term a few times. You say early on in the introduction, more precisely, this book is about what those words teach us when we pray them, Christ's words. This 7-line prayer, which so many of us can repeat with unthinking reflex, reflects a profound spiritual vision that was the core of Jesus' life and work. This vision can be captured in one simple word: flourishing. Later on in the book, you describe that this is not just kind of forming some kind of happiness machine where me plus more equals flourishing, which I think is a good counter for us. But I'd be interested to just hear why the word flourishing, how would you define that?
Thank you, Dan. Thanks for those kind and loving words. I love the word flourishing. It's in the name of our organization, the Institute for Faith and Flourishing. It's a word that I hear people use a lot, and I think that it's at the center of every human desire, and that's to be deeply and truly alive. And I've come to think of flourishing through the teaching of plants. Plants are these creatures that as they grow, deeply rooted in the soil, they begin to reveal themselves. And the more they reveal themselves, the more their beauty becomes manifest to the world, but also the more fragile and crushable they become. These delicate creatures become extremely nonviolent, and they're inviting response to their presence just through sharing of themselves. And I think that plants can be pretty beautiful pictures for us of flourishing, of self-revelation that is deeply rooted. So this is not accidental, this is not a matter of luck or privilege. It's deeply rooted going into the darkness. But as this flourishing reveals itself more and more into the world, a beauty and a fragility come together that is deeply, deeply resilient, but is radically nonviolent and is a presence of peace. So that's part of how I understand flourishing.
One of the things I think that's so central to this text, and even as you were saying that, I was just the art that's in this book is this whole thing is so well put together. The organic nature of just even the images that are used that describe that kind of natural progression, which is so core, I think, to Christ's teaching for us. Which also ties into, I think, something that's so embodied in the way that you tell these stories. The way that I kind of thought about this question was books are a collection of ideas that grow out of a context and a story. And I'd be interested for you to share a little bit, what's the story that comes before there was this book? And
Wow.
You've alluded to some of that already in regard to the thanks and the gratitude that's been given of even those who are in this room. But books are more than just ideas, as much as they are that. They are grown out of experiences, and I know some of the stories. I think particularly of the calling that's been placed in your life through those experiences you've had in Ethiopia. But maybe share a little bit with us some of the story that's maybe before this story. That I know those stories are also in there, but I think it'd be helpful for those who are looking for something to purchase to hear that story told. Like, what's the story before the story of the book? You can go a lot of directions with that one.
I sure can. There's many roots in this book, Dan. You know, when I was 22 years old, I moved to Ethiopia for the second time. And a few days after I landed there, this was 2 years before I met Lily, I remember hearing the rattle of machine gun fire in the city. And we learned after that that the police had killed about 200 people in a public demonstration. And that violent event dismembered the body politic in Ethiopia in a very violent way. And I remember being deeply disturbed by the fact that the churches in Ethiopia had little or no response to that event. And that's when I began going to the University of Chicago and studying with Eric Elshtain's mother, Jean Elshtain, who's an extraordinary ethicist. And asking this question, what is the relationship of human life to our experience of being human that is often filled with suffering and hardship and loss and weeping? And when Lily and I returned home from Ethiopia in 2021, 18 months ago, and I sat down to start writing this book, Dan, I was receiving so many death threats for our peacemaking work with the Neighbor Love movement in Ethiopia that were coming very close to home and that were very disturbing. People threatening to throw me off a bridge, to run me over with cars, to butcher my body. We live near a big bridge in Addis and by a main road in a neighborhood full of butcher shops. And I started to ask, what is the spirituality that can sustain our flourishing through these high stress, highly disturbing events in our lives? And it may not be political, could be a health event. It could be a family crisis. It could be a loss of love. It could be a crisis of faith or a struggle with mental health. What is the kind of spirituality that is robust enough to sustain our flourishing in these most challenging experiences of our lives? And Jesus' prayer has been my daily meditation for like the last 20 years. And the specific movements of Jesus' prayer have been sustaining to me. I mean, I remember nights when Lily would put a huge flower pot in front of our front door, our apartment in Addis, so that if someone tried to break into our apartment, that it would tip over and we would hear it smash so that we could try to call somebody for help. The prayer that I try to unpack in this book has sustained our pursuit of flourishing through these challenging situations. So that's pieces of the backstory.
So let me play off that a little, because one of the lines, I think you use it a couple times in the book, is when we seek to love our enemies, we become enemies. And then the challenge of living in that kind of space, and that's one of the things I think that's beautiful about what you're doing in this text, is it's not just an idea of Christ's love. It's the experience you're having of seeking to work out that ethic in your own life, which makes, I think, it's so real. And you do this through this kind of practicing this prayer of the Lord's Prayer. Why would you say is Jesus' prayer and his ethic within that prayer so compelling and so appealing? Could you describe for us kind of this journey through that prayer, and like what's your 2-minute elevator pitch for what this is? And I will let me just highlight this before you kind of answer that question, because he titles these chapters, I think, in helpful ways as he kind of goes through breaking down the Our Father. In chapter 1 is answering the question, who is God? Our Father who is in heaven. Chapter 2, how should we talk about God? Hallowed be your name. Chapter 3, what do you want? Your kingdom come. Chapter 4, how much is enough? Give us this day our daily bread. Chapter 5, how do we begin again? Forgive us as we forgive others. Chapter 6, can violence save us? Do not lead us into temptation, but deliver us from evil. And then finally, chapter 7, can you let go of power and prestige? Yours is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. So with that frame in mind, can you describe this practice of prayer and why Christ's ethic is so compelling and appealing?
Dan.
And then we're at time. So and then be thinking of a question you'd like to ask, because I'll pose that next. So.
Integrity is the deepest desire of my life. For words and actions to match. And I think that when we encounter the life of Jesus as recorded in his biographies, we encounter the highest level of integrity. I think that Jesus received his divine belovedness, and that's why we see Jesus free of reactivity and aggression all throughout his public movement when he's in these high stress fight or flight situations. Jesus speaks reverently of God. He hallows God's name. We never hear Jesus talk cheap of God. There's an extraordinary reverence that comes through every word that Jesus says about God. You know that God is never a sales pitch when Jesus is talking about God. The kingdom of God was embodied in Jesus' radical commitment of giving his life to be with and for the most vulnerable people on earth. For Jesus, that kind of relationship is what the kingdom of God looks like at its core, and that's not just how Jesus talked, but how Jesus lived. And he became an enemy for that. And he crossed the boundaries of acceptable religiosity and cultural patriotism. Give us this day our daily bread. Jesus lived a life of such incredible simplicity. In a time of consumerism where we need more and more and more, we see Jesus living this life of generosity and sharing and sacrifice. His desire was profoundly trained. Forgive us as we forgive. how do we start over? I don't know about you, but this question haunts me. And Jesus is in the final moment of his life, literally being lynched in public with people mocking him and saying, God doesn't want you. And what spills out of Jesus is words of forgiveness. Father, let them begin again. Hold on to these people. Don't damn these people to hell. That's radical flourishing. When you can be in your life's deepest pain, and what comes out of you is a desire for other people to be able to begin again. Don't lead us into temptation, but deliver us from evil. You know, Jesus is about to be arrested before this crucifixion. And the man is so composed, not in a fake way. The guy, he's sweating drops of blood. He's speaking about his distress. He says, my soul is overwhelmed to the point of death. But again, he's non-reactive and he's creative in his moment of greatest distress. He's not amygdala hijacked. His nervous system is in tune with the spirituality that he's been practicing in this prayer for at least 3 years. And so Jesus is able to practice nonviolence when everything inside of him, I'm sure, was raging to become aggressive and self-defensive. And yours is the kingdom and the power and the glory. This is my favorite, I think. You know, you said we're happiness machines. We're all desiring to compare ourselves to one another and probably to achieve some level of power and prestige. And throughout Jesus' life, he's constantly just letting it go. He's saying it's all God's. Jesus is not on an ego trip. I don't know about you, but I just love people who aren't egomaniacs. I feel like our public life is filled with egomaniacs right now. Jesus was able to say yours and genuinely surrender that egocentric orientation to life, which I think is the mark of the highest flourishing. When you can journey from belovedness through incredible violence that forgives and then just let go with surrender and trust, I think that you're flourishing. And so why this spirituality is so credible to me, Dan, is I see Jesus living it with integrity, not just saying it.
No, that's beautiful. I think that that does capture, I think, really well just what Andrew has put together for us to meditate on is a spirituality of integrity, of lives that match true words in action. I'd be interested. What questions are there in the audience? We have some time. If there's a question that would like to be posed to the author, what's a question someone has in the audience in regard to just the work he's doing? Yeah, David.
I have a question about audience. You write that this is for people who are on the edge of faith. I know lots of people who think they're at the center of faith. Like they're very sure of their faith. They're sure that their doctrine is the right doctrine. They're sure that they're grounded. They're in the center. What's your hope for them if they were to read this book?
Yeah, thank you. I want to say thank you to Professor David Lauber. He was one of my professors here at Wheaton College, and I'm so honored that you came. Thank you so much. We've already got Jesus' prayer downloaded. Whether you're a Christian or not, whether you pray or not, if someone starts saying, Our Father, you probably know what comes next. And I hope that for those of us for whom these words have become so familiar that they might just spend a little time exploring what they mean with me as best as I'm able to see, and see, oh wait, there's so much more here. And I would say, David, the second practice is especially important. Hallowed be your name. I believe Jesus is tapping into an ancient stream of Hebrew spirituality in this second movement of his prayer. It goes back to Jacob, where he is wrestling with this divine being, and he says, what is your name? He doesn't get a name. In fact, he's made to limp forward, and he goes and embraces reconciliation with his enemy after that. Moses, What is your name? He gets this name, I shall be who I shall be. A name that he can't properly say and understand. Manoah and his wife in the book of Judges, they encounter God again and they say, what is your name so that we can honor you? And the voice that they hear back says, my name is unknowable. I think Jesus is brilliantly distilling this tradition of spirituality in the second movement of his prayer. So we start by saying our Father. But then Jesus says, don't become too comfortable with God. Don't think that you already know who God is. And that's why we have to go through this radical reverence. I sometimes think of it as kind of the rumble strips of Jesus' prayer. Just as you're getting into it, there needs to be a little disruption. And I think that that's a helpful practice for all of us who are so sure that we're in the center of our faith, that we know who God is, and we've got all of the answers. Thank you, David.
I'll use some of your own words here because it plays off of this. Because early on in the book, you talk about prayer as a premeditation for practice.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what David's getting at here is just, the distinction. I like you draw this distinction between habit and practice. And when you draw this distinction and you invite this kind of practicing Jesus' prayer, you say habit is what we respectively do, whether we realize it or not, and whether it helps us or not. But practice is what we repeatedly choose to do, whether we feel it or not. It's doing the same thing over and over again. Practice fully grown is flourishing. And I think there's a challenge to those who might say, I'm at the center. Well, this integrity, as you talk about it, is this invitation for that kind of practicing life. And I think the influence that you place on the practices, and again, if you pick up this book, it's a book that needs to be meditated on and then lived. And he has some very helpful appendices in here. There's reflections at the end of each chapter, drawing in meditative kind of experience that will lead into embodied expression. I think you're giving us a spirituality of that kind of integrity, even in the way that you're constructing those things. Now it's a question.
I have a question. First, just want to say many congratulations to you, Andrew. Just so proud of all that you've done. As you've been talking about this and saying Our Father, that got me to thinking about how during the COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of us, even myself speaking personally, didn't really feel the sense of community in ways. There was a lot of isolation, a lot of having to draw inwards. And so I'm just wondering for you, were there any parts of this book that were informed by what you might have experienced during the pandemic, that shift from more of a community mindset to suddenly having to draw more inward?
Thank you so much for that question. I think that this book has been deeply born out of silence and experiences of solitude. And I have tried to turn off as much sound as possible, and I've tried to befriend solitude. And that became kind of mandatory at some points during this pandemic that we're in. Reducing sound, reducing noise, reducing busyness, and pursuing more stillness in which I could really sink into each of these movements of prayer. And I think that the first one, you are my beloved child, our Father, I think that one requires the most silence and stillness, because there are all of these nagging, attacking voices that create noise in our minds, or voices of aggression. I got a call last night from someone I love with all my heart, saying I had a suicidal thought for the first time in my life, and I was so terrified that this thought went through my head, and I didn't know what to do with it, and so I wanted to call you. And allowing the presence of God to enter into those places of pain, those places of disruption, requires a lot of time and patience. I found silence to be helpful. It's not for everybody. but I prefer more silence than music. So I think that first one in particular, I would say, receiving, Andrew, you are my beloved child, I delight in you, that's really required me to slow down and also to kind of work through some embarrassment. Because allowing myself to hear that voice, to be perfectly honest, there's a part of me that's, well, I don't need that. I'm okay. It's so intimate. It's so tender. I think there needs to be a kind of softening process, again, going back to the plant metaphor, where the seeds can actually sink into the soil of the soul. So maybe COVID has done some allowing of silence and stillness in which some of those seeds can sink in more. It's been challenging, of course, for all of us. Thank you.
Let's take one more, and then Steve will bring some.
Thank you for writing this. And part of my ministry is to handle people who are isolated and alienated. You know, been men of violence, in jail, or isolated for age or mental health. One of the things you just said, I wish to affirm. We have to let God love us. I can't tell you how many barriers, snarling dogs I have in me.
Yeah.
So it's real close because I have been.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to let you get that close. I will fight you. But when he comes in, very tender. And of course, it's usually about 2 a.m. Some tears, some desperate moment. For sure. But I want to affirm that. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
I'd often would say, preaching in the jail, gentlemen, you have to let God love you. No, you don't understand. It'll be the bravest thing you've ever done.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. That's right.
Well, I think that's a great note to end on, a wonderful affirmation. Can we join together in saying thank you to Andrew?